Labrador saves family from danger, what he did will melt your heart. Samantha pulled her car into the narrow driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires. She turned off the engine and stared at the small, weathered house in front of her. It wasn't much, a modest rental on the outskirts of town, but to her, it represented something precious, a chance to start over. The past year had been a storm of fear and chaos, and this quiet neighborhood offered a glimmer of hope. "Mom, are we staying here forever?" Noah, her 10-year-old son, asked from the back seat. His voice carried a mix of curiosity and caution. "For a while, sweetheart," Samantha replied, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "We're safe here. That's what matters." Next to him, Lily, 8 years old, hugged her stuffed bunny tightly. "It's small," she murmured, but her tone wasn't unkind, just observant, as if she were trying to measure whether this place could ever feel like home. "It's ours," Samantha said with a soft smile, stepping out of the car. "Come on. Let's take a look inside." The house was plain but cozy, with a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a living room that smelled faintly of fresh paint. Samantha had spent weeks saving up for this move, scraping together enough for the deposit and a few essentials. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, free from the oppressive shadow of Ryan, her ex-husband. She had worked hard to put distance between them, hoping that this new town would finally be a safe haven. Noah and Lily explored the house with quiet enthusiasm, their footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. Samantha watched them, her heart aching with a mixture of relief and guilt. They deserved so much more, but at least here, they had a chance to heal. The next morning, Samantha drove to the local animal shelter, a promise she had made to the kids fresh in her mind. She wanted to get a dog, not just for companionship but to provide them with a sense of safety. After all they had been through, she thought a dog could help rebuild their trust and confidence. As they walked through the shelter, Samantha felt overwhelmed by the barking and wagging tails. Then she saw him, a Labrador retriever with warm, intelligent eyes and a coat the color of honey. He sat quietly in his kennel, his gaze following her as she approached. "What about him?" Noah asked, pointing at the Labrador. A shelter worker appeared, smiling. "That's Charlie. He's a sweetheart, gentle, loyal, and great with kids." Samantha knelt by the kennel, meeting Charlie's steady gaze. Something about him felt right, as though he understood exactly what they needed. She looked at her kids, who were already nodding eagerly. "Let's meet him," she said. When Charlie was brought into the visitation room, he approached them calmly, his tail wagging gently. Lily giggled as he nuzzled her hand, and even Noah, usually reserved, smiled as Charlie sat by his side, leaning into him. "I think we've found our dog," Samantha said softly, stroking Charlie's head. Over the next few weeks, Charlie became an integral part of their lives. He followed Samantha around the house, lay by the kids' beds at night, and greeted them with exuberant energy each morning. He seemed to sense their unspoken fears, offering a quiet reassurance that everything would be okay. One evening, as Samantha was folding laundry, she noticed Charlie standing near the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. He was still, his ears pricked, his gaze fixed on something beyond the trees. "What is it, boy?" she asked, walking over to him. She peered outside but saw nothing unusual, just the dark silhouette of the trees swaying in the wind. Charlie let out a low growl, barely audible but enough to send a chill down her spine. Samantha locked the door and closed the blinds, her unease lingering. She told herself it was nothing, just the dog's heightened instincts reacting to a squirrel or a passing car. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Charlie knew something she didn't. The next morning, Lily ran to Samantha, holding a drawing she had made of Charlie. "Look, Mom. He's protecting us," she said proudly. Samantha smiled, her heart warming at the sight of the picture. "He sure is, sweetie," she replied, ruffling Lily's hair. But as she looked at the drawing, a bold, confident Charlie standing guard over their little house, she felt a pang of anxiety. It was silly, she told herself. They were safe here. They had to be. That night, as Samantha tucked the kids into bed, Charlie settled at the foot of the stairs, his usual spot. He seemed calm, but his eyes stayed open, watching. Samantha sat on the couch, trying to unwind with a book, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Charlie's behavior by the door. Was he just being a dog, or was there something more? Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint sound of leaves brushing against the house. Samantha glanced at the locked door, her unease bubbling to the surface. Charlie let out a soft sigh, his body relaxing against the floor, and Samantha took a deep breath, willing herself to do the same. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't facing it alone. With Charlie by her side, she dared to believe they could truly start over. Life in the new house was slowly settling into a routine. The mornings were filled with the hustle of getting the kids ready for school, while the afternoons were spent organizing their new space. Samantha felt a cautious optimism creeping into her days. The kids seemed happier, freer. Noah was warming up to his new classmates, and Lily had already befriended a girl from down the street. Charlie had become the glue holding them all together, his cheerful energy and protective presence creating a sense of stability they hadn't felt in years. But as the days turned into weeks, small, unsettling details began to creep into Samantha's otherwise peaceful life. At first, they were easy to dismiss, minor things that she chalked up to her own forgetfulness. A window left slightly open when she was sure she'd closed it. The garden hose, which she rarely used, uncoiled in the yard one morning. Samantha told herself it was nothing, just her mind playing tricks on her. One evening, after dinner, she stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes while the kids played upstairs. Charlie lay nearby, his head resting on his paws. The evening was calm, the rhythmic clinking of dishes against porcelain soothing in its mundanity. Then Charlie's head shot up, his ears twitching. He let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on the backyard. Samantha froze, following his line of sight to the sliding glass door. The yard was dark, the faint glow of the porch light casting long shadows across the trees. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her voice low. Charlie didn't move, his body tense, his growl deepening. Samantha hesitated before setting the dish down and wiping her hands. She walked to the door and peered outside, her eyes scanning the yard. Nothing seemed out of place, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She locked the door and pulled the blinds shut. "Probably a raccoon," she said aloud, more to herself than to Charlie. But as she turned back to the sink, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had been watching. The next day, Samantha found herself glancing out the windows more often than usual. Every rustling leaf or creaking branch made her jump. Even the sight of Ellen, her friendly neighbor, brought little relief. Ellen was walking her small terrier when she waved at Samantha, motioning her over. "Hey there," Ellen greeted warmly as Samantha stepped onto the porch. "How are you settling in?" "We're doing well," Samantha replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Ellen seemed to notice. "You've got a good dog there," Ellen said, nodding toward Charlie, who stood at Samantha's side, his gaze fixed on the yard. "Smart, too. I saw him pacing the fence line the other day." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "The fence line?" Ellen nodded. "Yeah, he looked pretty focused. You might want to check your locks at night. This area's usually quiet, but, you never know." The comment lingered in Samantha's mind long after Ellen walked away. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, her daughter's words sent another shiver through her. "Charlie doesn't sleep anymore," Lily said, her voice small. She hugged her stuffed bunny tighter. "He just watches." Samantha forced a smile, stroking Lily's hair. "He's just making sure we're safe, sweetie. That's what good dogs do." But as Samantha lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she found herself listening for every sound, her nerves fraying with each creak and groan of the house. Charlie's soft footsteps echoed faintly as he paced the hallway, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor. A few nights later, Samantha woke to the sound of Charlie barking, short, sharp bursts that sent her bolting upright. She rushed downstairs, her heart pounding. Charlie stood at the sliding glass door, his body rigid, his tail raised like a warning flag. "Charlie, what's wrong?" she whispered, approaching cautiously. This time, she saw it. Faint footprints in the dew-covered grass, leading from the tree line toward the house. Samantha's breath hitched. The footprints were large, too large to belong to an animal. She locked the door with shaking hands and pulled the curtains shut, her mind racing. Should she call the police? Tell Ellen? But what would she say? That her dog barked at some footprints? They'd think she was paranoid. The next morning, Samantha found herself staring at the footprints again, now faint under the sunlight. Noah joined her on the porch, squinting at the ground. "What are you looking at, Mom?" he asked. "Nothing," Samantha lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about planting some flowers out here." Noah didn't look convinced, but he didn't press further. Instead, he bent down to pet Charlie, who sat by Samantha's side, his watchful gaze scanning the yard. As the week went on, the unease settled like a heavy cloud over Samantha's life. She kept the doors and windows locked at all times, her nerves on edge whenever she heard an unfamiliar noise. Charlie's behavior only heightened her anxiety. He was more vigilant than ever, patrolling the house with a purpose that made her wonder if he could sense something she couldn't. One evening, as Samantha read a book in the living room, Charlie suddenly sprang to his feet, his ears pricked. He moved to the front door, letting out a low growl. "Not again," Samantha muttered, setting her book down. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. The porch was empty, but Charlie's growl didn't cease. She opened the door a crack, her heart pounding. "Hello?" she called into the night. No answer. The street was silent, the dim glow of the street lamp casting long shadows across the pavement. Samantha stepped back inside, locking the door firmly behind her. Charlie stood by the door for the rest of the night, his body tense, his eyes never leaving the window. Samantha sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. She stared out the window, watching as the first rays of morning sunlight broke through the trees. Charlie sat by the sliding glass door, his gaze fixed on the backyard as though standing watch. His presence was comforting, yet it also reminded her that the peace they had found in this little house was fragile. The footprints from the other night were still fresh in her mind. She had scrubbed them away from the yard, hoping to erase the lingering unease, but the memory clung to her. She had promised herself not to let fear control her again, not after everything she had endured, but the gnawing feeling in her gut was hard to ignore. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her reverie. She picked it up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "You can't hide from me forever." Samantha's hands trembled as she set the phone down. She didn't need to see the number to know who it was. Ryan. His words echoed in her mind, a cruel reminder of the control he had once held over her life. She had done everything to escape him, moved cities, changed her number, started over from scratch. And yet, here he was, slipping back into her life like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Charlie let out a low growl, drawing her attention. She followed his gaze to the window, but the yard was empty. Still, the tension in his stance made her blood run cold. "Is someone out there, boy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Charlie's growl deepened, his ears flattening against his head. Samantha locked the door and pulled the curtains shut, her mind racing. She knew she needed to act, but fear kept her rooted in place. She couldn't risk confronting Ryan, not again. That evening, Samantha decided to visit Ellen. She couldn't bear to keep this to herself any longer. Leaving the kids with Charlie, she walked the short distance to her neighbor's house, her breath fogging in the crisp night air. Ellen opened the door with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw Samantha's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, ushering her inside. Samantha hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before stepping into the cozy living room. "I think Ryan found us," she admitted, her voice trembling. "He's been sending messages. And there've been signs. Footprints near the house. Strange noises at night." Ellen's brow furrowed, concern etched across her face. "Have you called the police? And tell them what?" Samantha replied bitterly. "That my ex is texting me and my dog barks at shadows. They'll say it's nothing." Ellen placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to go through this alone, Samantha. If you ever feel unsafe, call me. Day or night." Samantha nodded, grateful for Ellen's kindness, but the knot in her stomach didn't ease. She knew that no amount of reassurance could stop Ryan if he decided to act. When Samantha returned home, she found Charlie sitting at the front door, his body tense, his ears perked. He wagged his tail when he saw her, but his eyes never left the window. "You're my protector, aren't you?" she murmured, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. "What would we do without you?" Charlie leaned into her touch, his warm presence grounding her in a way nothing else could. For a brief moment, the weight of her fear seemed to lift. But the reprieve was short-lived. A few nights later, Samantha was jolted awake by the sound of glass shattering. Her heart raced as she sat up in bed, straining to hear over the pounding of her own pulse. Then she heard it, Charlie barking, loud and fierce, a sound she had never heard from him before. Samantha jumped out of bed and rushed to the kids' room. Noah and Lily were already awake, their eyes wide with fear. "Stay here," she whispered, closing the door behind her as she stepped into the hallway. Charlie's barking grew louder, more frantic. Samantha grabbed the baseball bat she kept under her bed and crept downstairs, her hands shaking. When she reached the living room, she saw the source of the noise. A brick had been thrown through the window, scattering glass across the floor. Charlie stood by the broken window, his body rigid, his bark echoing through the night. Samantha's gaze darted to the yard, but whoever had thrown the brick was already gone. A folded piece of paper tied to the brick fluttered in the cold breeze. With trembling hands, Samantha picked it up and unfolded it. The words scrawled across the page made her blood run cold. "I'm closer than you think." Tears stung her eyes as she clutched the paper. This was Ryan's doing, she was sure of it. He was toying with her, trying to break her resolve. But as she looked down at Charlie, his protective stance unwavering, she felt a flicker of determination. She couldn't let Ryan win. Not again. The next morning, Samantha called a locksmith to reinforce the doors and windows. She also filed a police report, though the officer's polite but indifferent demeanor left her feeling more frustrated than reassured. "We'll keep an eye on things," he had said, as though that would make any difference. That afternoon, Noah found Samantha sitting on the porch, her hands clasped tightly around a mug of tea. He sat beside her, his small shoulders brushing against hers. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" he asked quietly. Samantha forced a smile, wrapping an arm around him. "Of course we are," she said, though her voice wavered. "We have Charlie to protect us, don't we?" Noah nodded, his gaze drifting to where Charlie lay in the yard, his head resting on his paws. "He's the best dog ever," he said with conviction. Samantha kissed the top of his head, her heart aching with the weight of their situation. She didn't know how they would get through this, but she knew one thing for certain: Charlie would do whatever it took to keep them safe. The house was eerily quiet that night. Samantha had double-checked all the locks before heading to bed, her nerves fraying after days of constant unease. Charlie, as always, lay at the foot of the stairs, his head resting on his paws but his eyes open and alert. Samantha knew he wouldn't sleep, not while she and the kids needed him. Upstairs, Noah and Lily were sound asleep, their small breaths filling the silence of their shared room. Samantha envied their ability to find peace despite everything. She wished she could give them the sense of security they deserved, but Ryan's shadow loomed too large. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside, felt like a harbinger of danger. Samantha had just begun to drift off when Charlie's sharp bark jolted her awake. It wasn't his usual warning growl, it was urgent, fierce, filled with a protective intensity that sent her heart racing. She sat up, listening, and then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of the front door handle rattling. Her breath caught in her throat. Grabbing the baseball bat from under her bed, she moved toward the hallway, her heart pounding. Charlie's barks echoed through the house, each one sharper than the last. As she crept down the stairs, she caught sight of the front door. The lock was shaking violently, the frame trembling as someone tried to force their way inside. "Charlie, stay back," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The Labrador didn't move. He stood firm, his body a wall of muscle and fur between Samantha and the door. The rattling stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Samantha's grip on the bat tightened as she waited, her pulse thundering in her ears. Then, with a deafening crash, the door flew open, the lock splintering as it gave way. Ryan stepped into the house, his face twisted in anger, his eyes wild. "Samantha," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Did you really think you could keep me away?" Charlie launched forward before Samantha could respond, his bark exploding into the space like a thunderclap. Ryan stumbled back, startled by the dog's sheer ferocity. "What the hell?" Ryan muttered, regaining his footing. He glared at Charlie, raising his hands as though to ward him off. "Get this damn dog away from me." Samantha stood frozen, torn between fear and the overwhelming need to protect her children. "Get out, Ryan," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You have no right to be here." Ryan sneered, taking a step closer. "You think this mud is going to stop me? You're mine, Samantha. You always have been." Charlie growled, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Samantha had never seen him like this, every muscle in his body was taut, his teeth bared, his eyes locked on Ryan with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. "Charlie, no," she called, but it was too late. Ryan lunged toward her, and in an instant, Charlie sprang into action. The Labrador barreled into Ryan with the force of a freight train, knocking him to the ground. Ryan shouted in surprise, flailing as Charlie pinned him down, his teeth flashing dangerously close to Ryan's face. Samantha grabbed the phone from the counter, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. "Please, send help," she whispered urgently into the phone. "My ex-husband broke into my house, he's dangerous." As she spoke, she watched Charlie hold Ryan at bay, his growls rumbling like a storm. Ryan tried to push him off, but Charlie's weight was immovable, his determination unshakable. Samantha's heart ached with a mix of fear and gratitude as she realized just how far Charlie was willing to go to protect her and the kids. "Mom!" Noah's voice rang out from the top of the stairs. Samantha turned to see him and Lily standing there, their eyes wide with terror. "Stay up there," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Don't come down." Ryan seized the moment of distraction. With a grunt, he shoved Charlie off and scrambled to his feet. Blood dripped from a shallow bite on his arm, but his anger only seemed to grow. "You're going to regret that," he spat, reaching into his jacket. Samantha's breath caught as she saw the glint of metal. Ryan pulled out a knife, the blade catching the dim light. Charlie barked again, louder this time, as if daring Ryan to come closer. "Ryan, stop!" Samantha pleaded, stepping between him and the stairs. "Think about the kids. Don't do this." But Ryan wasn't listening. He took a step forward, his grip tightening on the knife. Samantha raised the bat, her hands trembling. "I'll use this if I have to," she warned, her voice steadier than she felt. Ryan hesitated, his eyes flicking between the bat and Charlie, who stood ready to lunge again. For a moment, Samantha thought he might back down. Then Charlie moved. The Labrador charged, his bark echoing like a battle cry. He leapt at Ryan, his powerful body colliding with him before the knife could move. The two tumbled to the ground, and the knife skidded across the floor, coming to rest at Samantha's feet. Ryan shouted in frustration, struggling to push Charlie off, but the dog was relentless. Samantha grabbed the knife and threw it across the room, far out of Ryan's reach. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. "Mom!" Noah's voice broke through the chaos. She turned to see him holding Lily close, tears streaming down both of their faces. "Is it over?" Samantha nodded, her voice catching in her throat. "Almost, sweetheart. Almost." The front door burst open, and 2 police officers stormed in, their guns drawn. "Step away," one of them commanded. Samantha grabbed Charlie's collar, pulling him back as the officers moved in to subdue Ryan. He fought against them, shouting obscenities, but they quickly restrained him and hauled him to his feet. As the chaos subsided, Samantha sank to her knees, her arms wrapping around Charlie. His sides heaved with exertion, but he licked her face, his eyes soft and reassuring. "You saved us," she whispered, burying her face in his fur. "You're our hero, Charlie." The officers approached, their expressions a mix of concern and admiration. "That's one hell of a dog you've got there," one of them said, tipping his hat. Samantha managed a small smile. "He's more than that," she replied. "He's family." As they led Ryan out in handcuffs, the weight that had been crushing Samantha's chest for months began to lift. She looked at her kids, at Charlie, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly safe. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence carried a sense of peace rather than fear. Samantha stood in the kitchen, staring at the broken glass scattered near the front door. The locksmith had finished repairing the frame, installing a deadbolt stronger than the one before. The mess of the night still lingered, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Samantha could breathe deeply. Charlie lay on a blanket near the couch, his side rising and falling steadily as he rested. He was exhausted but otherwise unharmed, his fur matted in places where Ryan had struggled against him. Samantha knelt beside him, stroking his head gently. "You're amazing, you know that?" she whispered. Charlie opened one eye and let out a soft huff, his tail thumping weakly against the floor. She smiled, tears stinging her eyes as she leaned down to kiss his head. "We don't deserve you." The kids came down the stairs cautiously, peeking into the living room before running to Samantha. Lily threw her arms around her mother, clutching her tightly, while Noah sat beside Charlie, his small hands stroking the Labrador's golden fur. "Is Ryan gone for good?" Noah asked, his voice trembling. Samantha pulled Lily closer, nodding. "He's gone, sweetheart. The police will make sure he doesn't come back." Lily looked up, her wide eyes brimming with tears. "Charlie saved us," she said softly. "He did," Samantha agreed, her voice breaking. "He's the bravest dog I've ever known." The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Samantha spoke with the police, finalized her restraining order against Ryan, and began making arrangements to move. Staying in this house, no matter how much she had wanted it to be a fresh start, no longer felt safe. Ellen stopped by with a casserole one evening, her terrier yipping excitedly at Charlie as he lay near the couch. "You've got a hero on your hands," Ellen said, smiling warmly. "This town's going to be talking about that dog for years." Samantha laughed softly, shaking her head. "He's always been a hero to us. Now everyone else knows it too." Ellen reached out, squeezing Samantha's shoulder. "You did the right thing, Samantha. Protecting your family, trusting your instincts. I know it wasn't easy, but you're stronger than you think." Samantha felt a lump rise in her throat. "I couldn't have done it without Charlie," she admitted. "He gave me the courage I didn't know I had." That weekend, the kids decided to throw a hero party for Charlie. They decorated the living room with hand-drawn posters that read, "Thank you, Charlie," and "World's Best Dog." Samantha baked a small cake for the kids and made a special dog-friendly treat for Charlie. When they brought out the treat, Charlie's ears perked up, and his tail wagged enthusiastically. He devoured it in seconds, licking his lips as the kids cheered. "Charlie, you're a hero," Lily declared, wrapping her arms around his neck. Noah nodded solemnly. "You're the best, Charlie. We'd be lost without you." Samantha watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with gratitude. The past weeks had been some of the hardest of her life, but seeing her children smiling again made every struggle worth it. Charlie had not only saved their lives, he had restored their hope. As the days passed, Samantha finalized plans to move to a new house in a neighboring town. It wasn't far, but it was far enough to put even more distance between them and Ryan. The new house had a spacious backyard, perfect for Charlie to run and play. On their last night in the old house, Samantha sat on the porch with Charlie, staring at the stars. The air was cool, and the faint chirping of crickets filled the silence. She reached down, scratching behind his ears. "I don't know what we would have done without you," she said softly. "You've been with us through everything, watching over us, keeping us safe. You're not just a dog, Charlie. You're family." Charlie tilted his head, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that seemed almost human. Samantha felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't out of fear or sadness, it was gratitude. The next morning, as they loaded the last of their belongings into the car, Samantha took one final look at the house. It wasn't the fresh start she had hoped for, but it had been a stepping stone to something better. She closed the door behind her, her heart light with the promise of a new beginning. The drive to the new house was quiet, the kids dozing in the back seat while Charlie sat in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window. Samantha glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're going to love it there," she said. "Big yard, lots of space to explore. It's going to be perfect." When they arrived, the kids sprang from the car, running into the house with excitement. Charlie followed them, his tail wagging as he sniffed every corner of the new space. The house already felt brighter, safer, more like home. That evening, as they sat on the back porch, Samantha watched Noah and Lily throw a ball for Charlie in the yard. His golden coat gleamed in the setting sun, his bark echoing joyfully as he chased after the ball. Lily turned to Samantha, her face glowing with happiness. "We're safe now, right, Mom?" Samantha nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Samantha leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to Charlie. He lay in the grass, his eyes half closed as he watched over the kids. In that moment, Samantha knew that their journey, though far from over, was finally on the right path. They had found their hero, their guardian, and their peace. And for the first time in years, Samantha felt truly free. The new house quickly became a sanctuary for Samantha and her children. It was tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by tall trees and open skies. The yard was spacious, giving Charlie plenty of room to roam. Samantha felt the weight of the past lifting with every unpacked box and every moment spent laughing with her kids in their new home. Weeks had passed since that terrifying night, but the memories still lingered. Sometimes Samantha would catch herself looking over her shoulder or double-checking the locks before bed. But whenever the fear began to creep back, she would glance at Charlie. His calm, steady presence reminded her that they were safe now, that they had overcome the worst together. One crisp morning, Samantha sat on the back porch, sipping her coffee as the sun rose. Charlie lay at her feet, his golden fur gleaming in the soft light. The kids were still asleep, the house quiet except for the chirping of birds. "You're settling in pretty well, aren't you?" she said, reaching down to scratch behind Charlie's ears. He lifted his head, giving her a contented look before resting it back on his paws. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of the screen door creaking open. Noah and Lily stepped outside, still in their pajamas, their faces lit with sleepy smiles. "Can we play with Charlie, Mom?" Lily asked, holding a ball in her hands. Samantha nodded, smiling. "Of course. He's been waiting for you." The kids ran into the yard, calling for Charlie as they threw the ball. The Labrador's tail wagged furiously as he leapt to his feet, chasing after the toy with boundless energy. Samantha watched them play, her heart swelling with gratitude. This was what she had fought for, their freedom, their joy, their safety. And it had been Charlie, their steadfast protector, who had made it all possible. As the weeks turned into months, Charlie's role as the family's guardian only deepened. He followed Samantha around the house, sat patiently by the door whenever the kids were at school, and slept at the foot of her bed at night. It was as if he understood that his job wasn't over, that his presence was still a source of comfort and strength for all of them. One afternoon, Samantha received an unexpected visit from Ellen. The older woman arrived with a tray of cookies and a warm smile, her small terrier trotting behind her. "How's my favorite hero?" Ellen asked, bending down to pet Charlie. "He's doing great," Samantha replied, setting the tray on the counter. "I don't know what we'd do without him." Ellen straightened, her eyes soft with understanding. "You've all come a long way, Samantha. You should be proud of yourself, and Charlie, of course." Samantha smiled, her gaze drifting to where Charlie lay by the window, watching the kids play outside. "We're just taking it one day at a time," she said. "But it feels good. It feels right." That evening, as Samantha tucked the kids into bed, Lily hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mom," she said softly. "And I love Charlie too. He's the best dog in the whole world." Samantha kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart full. "We're lucky to have him," she agreed. "Now get some sleep, sweetheart." After turning off the lights and closing their door, Samantha made her way to the living room. Charlie was already there, lying on his favorite rug near the fireplace. She sat beside him, resting a hand on his back. "You've done so much for us," she said quietly. "More than I could ever repay. You're not just a dog, Charlie. You're family." Charlie shifted, resting his head on her lap. Samantha ran her fingers through his fur, a sense of calm washing over her. In his presence, she felt whole, like the pieces of her life that had been scattered were finally coming together. Months later, on a warm spring morning, Samantha stood in the yard, watching as Noah and Lily played fetch with Charlie. The kids' laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Charlie bounded after the ball, his energy as vibrant as ever. Samantha leaned against the porch railing, her heart swelling with emotion. She thought about everything they had been through, every challenge they had faced, and how far they had come. The fear and pain of the past were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was stronger now, her family was stronger, and much of that strength had come from the unwavering loyalty of a Labrador who had refused to let them fall. As Charlie returned the ball to Lily, his tail wagging furiously, Samantha called out to him. "Come here, boy." Charlie trotted over, his eyes bright with happiness. Samantha knelt down, wrapping her arms around him. "You're our hero, Charlie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're so lucky to have you." Charlie licked her cheek, his tail thumping against the ground. Samantha laughed, wiping her face as she hugged him tighter. In that moment, surrounded by her children's laughter and the warmth of the sun, Samantha felt a deep, unshakable peace. They had found their safe haven, their fresh start. And at the heart of it all was Charlie, the loyal guardian who had given them the courage to face their fears and the strength to rebuild their lives. For the first time in years, Samantha allowed herself to believe that they were exactly where they were meant to be.